Welcome to this lecture on description, correlation and causality as part of the QED module. This is part 1 on description. I've started with this picture because it's used later on in one of the examples, but also because it might be useful to think before you start about how you might be able to describe and investigate the lives and experiences of people in this kind of situation using quantitative data, but also using qualitative data, and the advantages and disadvantages of each one and how perhaps you could use them together. Though of course we're focusing mostly on quantitative evidence in this course. So the lecture is going to cover these 4 areas: description, correlation, causality, and then some conclusions to draw it together. Really the first 2 parts, description and correlation, these are both what's called descriptive statistics, in that they're just dealing with the data we actually have, not looking beyond the sample you have collected data on. The third part starts to move a bit beyond this to causal effects. It's causality, and that deals more with the kind of things we'll look at in the next few lectures. And the first part then is on description. So we're going to look at why you'd want to describe quantitatively, so some motivation, and then 2 aspects of description. One is the idea of distributions and the other is the idea of descriptive statistics. So first of all, some motivation. Why would you want to describe quantitatively? Well, one way is to summarise large amounts of data. So here's some data from World Bank survey on Kenyan households looking at food expenditure per week in the household. And there's 1,942 households. So there's some of the data. So here, household number 1 spent 6,100 Kenyan shillings per week. Household number 2, 1,590. So it could be a smaller household, or they just didn't eat so much, or they grew their own food. 8,000 here, 1,000 and so on. You can see that there's quite a lot of data. This is the next set of households and another set down to here. So I think this gives you a fairly good impression of the amount of money that these Kenyan households are spending on food per week. Except of course it doesn't, unless you're someone that can glance at these numbers and understand them instantly. For most people it's a massive numbers and too much to take in. So in many situations, instead of presenting that in an article or a presentation, you might be better advised just to present this, an overall average or mean. So the mean food costs for these Kenyan households is 2,451 Kenyan shillings per week. That works out at roughly £18 a week, or 20-something dollars. So it's not always useful to give all the information, all the data, all the values. Sometimes it's useful just to give a few descriptive statistics to round it all up into a simpler and easy to digest form like this. So why describe quantitatively? First of all, to summarise large amounts of data, but beyond that we might describe patterns within the data, and the reason for doing that is you might be able to generalise, and you might be able to find a basis for talking about causality, which clearly is important if you want to talk about what are you going to do about a situation. You need to know what affects what. Here we have 2 examples of the kind of findings that describing quantitatively might help us arrive at. In the first case, we're just interested in one particular variable, and here it's the number of years that migrants have been away in this situation. So you could call that just variable Y. That's quite simple. And the finding is that about 25% of the migrants have been away between 1 and 3 years. In the second case here, we've got data about remittances, and remittances means that the money that migrants sent home. But we also have data on poverty, which is perhaps the main thing we're interested in here. And it seems that description shows us that these may be linked, and then by using other techniques we might find out there's a causal link between money sent home, remittances, and poverty. There's also data on health and education, so 2 further variables, and it seems there could be links between remittances and spending on health, and remittances and spending on education. So here, description is showing us how 4 different variables may be linked together, whereas in the first case we're just describing the distribution of values of one variable.